This is Obed. He was a very wealthy Nigerian. In fact, he was regarded as one of the wealthiest in his hometown, Ofio. How do you know that a Nigerian is wealthy? There are many ways of knowing that, amongst which is the number of vehicles he owns, number of cars he owns. If we are to measure wealth with the number of cars one owns, then Obed could be said to be a very wealthy person because he had quite a number of cars. Most of them he had not used before. They were just parked there in his place of residence. You can count close to 10 of them that he had not used at all. That is just for cars. Then you can also talk about the commercial houses. He owns a number of houses, some commercial, some private. But the commercial houses were in very large numbers. In his hometown alone, he had about 5 houses which were just for commercial purposes. Then in other cities, about 3 cities that are around the town, he owns a great number of commercial houses. Information had it that he was having about 10, nothing less than 10 in each of those cities. And he does business with them. He knew how to do his business. He knew how to make money. He was a real money magnet. These commercial houses were either for rent or mainly for hotel purposes because he was mainly into hotel business. And he ran this hotel business in such an efficient manner that the thing was getting him he was making his cash flow very, very effective. So some of the commercial houses he had in his town was as a result of a new university that was opened somewhere around town. When most of these universities come on steam, they hardly have enough space for their students in campus. So most of the students look for nearby houses around town where they could live for the time being. And that was where people like Obed came in because Obed had a number of such houses where students could, hire for the time being and, go to just live anyway. It's just a place for them to stay while going to school. He had them in great numbers. Then he had very large farmland, very vast farmland where he grows virtually every food item. Every agricultural item is grown there. Vegetables, quite a number of items. Pepper, just all those things that you could just go and pluck and use for cooking. He hardly goes to the market. I mean, his family hardly goes to the market. They just go to the farm and pluck whatever they want to eat. He's not even a man that eats much. He's a vegetarian and he doesn't eat something that is cooked as such. So most of what he eats are, fruits and vegetables. So most of the items he needs are, got directly from his farmland. He doesn't buy from the market. He worries much about buying the right stuff. He's into mainly organic products he could ingest into his body without really bothering. Those were the items he had mainly in his farm. He had this massive plantation as well, where he grows all types of cash crops. He grows cocoa, he grows rubber, he had kola nuts, They had oranges, mangoes. In that same plantation, you could count as many as possible. So that was when people began to understand that the cocoa pod is not the real thing, but the fruit inside, the nut inside. When they harvest the pod, they had to break it up and bring out the nut. It is that nut inside that is the valuable thing. They have a way of drying it. They dry it and then sell to those who are interested, mainly in the major cities, because they are raw materials for chocolates. He doesn't produce chocolate himself, so he sells to those who are in the export business. So what I'm trying to say is that he had these things in great numbers. Then in the case of rubber, they have a way of extracting the latex. There's something they call the latex. They extract it and use it as raw material for the production of tires, plastic materials, and what have you. He grows them. He has them in his plantation, and that one too brings him quite a lot of money. Oh, you also had palm trees in his plantation. From these palm trees, you can get oil, palm oil, which you can extract from the nut that grows on the palm tree. He was virtually growing all manner of cash crops in that plantation. Just name them and you find them in his plantation. This plantation is so big that he had workers live in various camps inside the plantation. They live there with members of their family, not just them alone. That's to tell you how big the plantation is. So he uses these workers to take care of the plantation. And so with these workers, the plantation is run at a very efficient capacity. His wife, Betty, was a very caring woman. She was a good housewife who stood by the side of Obed throughout the time he was struggling. She was a very visionary woman. It was even her that introduced Obed into the plantation business. Story had it that when she was young, she used to follow his dad to his place of work. His dad was a plantation worker. So once in a while, she accompanies the dad to his place of work. And from there, she began to learn about plantations and she got interested in the plantation business. So when eventually she got married to Obed, she introduced Obed into the plantation business and began to help Obed put the plantation business into operation. It was she that really took care of the plantation. So when Obed decided to follow her advice and establish a plantation, she became one of the first pillars of the success of the scheme. Unfortunately, she suffered from a severe breast cancer and did not survive it. They were very, very close, and Obed suffered a heavy loss when eventually she gave up the ghost. Before then, there was nothing Obed did not do to nurse her back to good health. If it was money, Obed really spent money to see if she can bounce back to health. But I guess her time was up. She eventually gave up the ghost. After she passed away, Obed was very, very depressed for a very long time. He kept thinking about her. He kept mourning her, for a long time. He really felt the loss of the woman. As he put it, Betty was part of him. and that a part of him had been taken away. But as time goes on, he had to get over it because, like he said, it was God that gave it, and now God has taken away. There is nothing man can do about it. If it were money, if it were possible to use money to buy back Betty's life, Obed would have done it because he had so much money to spend and spare. And that was the way he put it too. If it were possible to pay off debts and leave the victim, Betty would have been by my side today. That was what he said, or that was what he used to say. It's rather unfortunate he lost her when he did. Then enter his two children, Phillip and Joseph. Surprisingly, these boys were not educated beyond the primary school. They just finished primary school, and Obed did not bother to send them to any secondary school of sorts, even though he was known to be very, very wealthy. So it was not a matter of money, but for some reasons best known to him, because he did not see why he did not send them to school. He just, once they finished primary school, they stopped going to school. And because Obed had many house helps doing various things, various chores in the house, these children were virtually doing nothing. They were just lazing around doing nothing. But his first son, Philip, was a very wise child. Knowing fully well that there were a number of cars parked in the house doing nothing, he began to learn with one of them. He began to learn how to drive a car. He doesn't want to sit idle and do nothing. So he was learning how to drive a car. Eventually, he became good at driving vehicles and got himself a driver's license. Driver's license that gave him permission to drive both public and private vehicles. It was this license that he took to one of the big cities and got a job in a logistic company. Phillips was a man of his own and wanted to carve a niche for himself. He doesn't want to remain attached to his father. Ordinarily, he would have remained in the town and continued to feed on his father. After all, the man had the means. But he told himself that it was time he makes a clean break from his father, and so he was gone to establish his own thing. And that was how he left town and went to one of the big cities and got a job. But the second son, Joseph, remained behind. He was the one without vision. He doesn't just want to do anything of his own. He was busy making troubles for the old man, Obed. So when Obed discovered that he was all troubles, he decided to contact a friend of his in one of the cities, who now got him a job. But he was not to last long in the job. For whatever reason, he came back and refused to continue doing the job. By the time he came back at this time, he did not make troubles. So Obed did not even bother himself anymore, since he was not making so much trouble. But Joseph knew what he wanted and was not going to make any mistake this time around. He knew that Obed had become old. He knew that the man was becoming very frail on a daily basis. So he began to feel that someone had to be there in case anything happens. And that someone may just be himself. That was what he was thinking. He wanted to be there when the man gives up, and then he will just take over. He was a very greedy person, and that was what he planned. Meanwhile, his dad, Obed, has had a second wife. Since the passing away of his very dear Betty, he had tried to stay away from other women. He tried to really stay away from other women, but people had kept telling him about the need of someone who would take care of him as he was getting older. You need someone who will be very close to you in times of need. They will always advise him. He saw some reason in what they were saying. So as a very staunch Christian, he does not want to sin against God, or so he thought. So he had always abstained from all these things. So he decided to take another woman, Cecilia, who bore him a child. But Cecilia was not the down-to-earth type. He does not care much about his properties or where they were. She was either not interested or does not even care at all. Joseph knew this and capitalized on her ignorance. It was not surprised that when Obed eventually went to be with his creators, Joseph quickly took over. Fortunately enough, Obed left a will, which Joseph saw and kept in a safe place where nobody would reach it. The properties in question were very vast, plenty of them. But being the enlightened man that he was, he decided to put down how the estate he left behind was to be appropriated. He had seen how messy it could be if a man, does not leave a will behind. So he was wise enough to leave one behind. He was not ready to cause trouble. He was not ready to let that happen at all. But Joseph was very greedy. He was a very greedy type. He had been scheming to keep everything to himself, to the exclusion of the others. The first son was the only threat he had. So he was doing everything to ensure that one was cornered. It was in an attempt to corner him that he decided to approach a medicine man. Joseph had seen the will and had hidden it from public view. He now approached a medicine man in town. What the man assisted him to do was still debatable up till today. It was not clear exactly what the man was assisting him to do. The fact was that Philip, the first son, came home briefly during the burial of Obed and stayed for just a few days after the funeral. He then left for his biz and did not ask any other thing about the properties that were left behind. Though he was eventually able to have access to the will, which he literally wrestled from Joseph, because Joseph was hiding it and would not let anybody see it. So it took time for him to get the will out of the arms of Joseph. With the departure of Philip, Joseph was now in charge of everything. He had the medicine man in his payroll. Since then, why he did this became an object of contention in town. But when asked why he was keeping such a man in his payroll, he retorted that he has the right to hire anyone that has the professional ability to help him manage the vast estate. And that was where that matter ended. Joseph eventually took over everything in the vast estate to the exclusion of others. Even the first son was pushed aside. But after some time, Philip came and asked Joseph to render an account of his stewardship of the vast estate. But Joseph would not hear any of that. Instead, he was ready for a showdown. But Philip was not the violent type. So he decided to report the matter to the village elders. The elders called a meeting and invited Joseph to come and say his own point. But Joseph told them point blank that he was not ready to listen to what Philip was saying. He was not ready to cooperate at all. They now advised him that, look, my son, you are not towing the right path. You are not doing the right thing. We know the history of your father. We know what he had. But Joseph was not ready to listen. Rather, he told anybody who was standing on his way that he was ready to deal with that person. When Philip had that, he abandoned the whole thing. But the elders have already advised him that what he was doing was not doing the right thing. That posterity, that is they told him that, look, the gods don't like things like this. But Joseph was already beyond reasoning. He continued to hold on to everything to the exclusion of other parties. So when Philip saw that he was ready for a showdown, he abandoned him and left. Unfortunately, Joseph was to give up the ghost unexpectedly at a very young age of 55 years. What happened? Nobody could really place a finger on the cause of his passing away at such a young age. Some said it was as a result of greed taken too far. Others said that if you are reaping where you did not sow, your end will be rather unfortunate. Some gave many other reasons for his passing at such an early age. The fact remains that these were all in the realm of people's imagination. But it was very clear that if you become too greedy, you want to hold on to the whole property to yourself alone. You want to appropriate the whole thing to yourself alone, to the exclusion of every other person. Then it's going to be unfortunate at the end of the day. Life has a way of being funny. Not funny, really. Life has a way of teaching people some lessons. So let us see, what lessons have we learned here. One thing is clear here, that you cannot arrogate everyone's property to yourself alone. Nature frowns at such greed and arrogance. The consequences are often grave. You may continue to do it and ignore whatever people are telling you, but at the end of the day, there is something about nature that abhors greed. By the time it starts happening, you just be wondering why or where the problems are coming from, without knowing that you were really the cause. Thank you for listening. I hope you have learned a few things here. Please like, share, and comment. Bye.